Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phillip Flores. Guys, really do believe that life is just a bundle of habits. It's the small things, I think, that make or break us. In today's video, we're talking about the Nikon Z6 and its capabilities as far as slow motion video. It's pretty incredible, I think, but I want to get your feedback in the comments below, so please don't hesitate to ask any questions. Let me know what you think. First, I want to dive into the settings. If you're new to the brand or you're new to the camera or you're interested, I want to show you what it looks like to just kind of switch over to slow-mo and kind of how I have the body set up to do those things. And then I want to show you some footage. I was recently able to capture some horseback riding and some waterfalls, and which is some good times. Slow motion is one of those things that you've got to be careful with, right? It's super, let's see, it's a spice, right? It's not salt and pepper. I mean, salt and pepper's good, but this is, you know, this is spicy. You got to be careful with how much you use slow motion, right? Moderation in all things, including moderation. Let's just get started. Okay, guys. So what we need to do is turn the camera on and toggle this display toggle switch here from photo to the camera, the video camera mode, right? And then you just need to hit this information button, and that pulls up this menu where there's like 10 items, and these items are actually customizable, but maybe we'll get into that later. Even by default, one of the items should be the frame size and rate and the image quality, so hit OK. I usually leave the movie quality on high, go down, and then start going to the left in this case, to either 60, 100, or 120 frames per second. And then select which one you want by hitting OK. Hit the I button to go back to just get ready to shoot. And you can verify your frame size and rate right here. And if you don't see this, then toggle your entire display using this display button up here until you get the information that you want. That's it.
Okay guys, so I'm going to try to keep all the camera settings down here in the bottom left of the screen. Gives you an idea of the lighting and the exposure or whatever that I was dealing with. Most of the time I actually shoot in full manual settings, except for the most part when I'm outside and I'm not in control of my lighting. If there's any weather whatsoever, or if my composition is changing, I'm getting closer or further away from my subjects, then I will actually switch the ISO to auto, and I'll keep everything else manual. In this case, all the shots are using the flat image profile and a 5200 Kelvin white balance setting. Horses kind of scare me. They're beautiful animals, but they're huge, and you know, I don't know a lot about horses, so this was an incredible experience for me. It always is when you know, I find myself closer to one of these animals. Such a wonderful experience, humbling. This young woman is a professional rider. I think she's been to the national champs actually. She's only 14 years old, and she was very kind to allow me to get out there with her while she was practicing pole bending, and it was just a great experience. The first thing I want to say about the camera's capability is I think the IBIS in conjunction with the VR in Legacy Glass does a wonderful job at stabilizing the image. Everything you see is handheld, and you know, when you're using the F-mount adapter, I don't think you get the 5-axis image stabilization. I'll have to look back at the manual. I think you only get the 3-axis stabilization, but it looks so good. Can't wait to get my hands on some native glass. This short little segment here is the only segment I shot at 60 frames per second. The reason it's 60 frames per second actually is just because the camera recognizes when you put an APS-C lens on it, if it's a Nikon lens, for the most part, any contemporary lens that's DX, the camera will recognize it. And when it does, it forces you to go into a crop mode, DX crop mode, and then it limits your frame rate to 60 FPS. From here on out, we're gonna see 120 frames per second. I was more interested in pushing the camera to its limits here. It's extremely smooth. All of the shots, again, are handheld and they are in manual focus. This is with a Tokina, an old Tokina 12-24 f4. And it's a great little wide-angle lens. It's actually an APS-C lens, but the camera doesn't recognize it as such, and it lets me therefore shoot in 120 frames per second. I find that manual focus works really, really well on the Z6, no matter what lens I'm using, just as a side effect from the focus peaking feature that you get with the camera. My personal preference is to keep the setting on red lines and the sensitivity to high, but you'll want to adjust at least the color to match something that isn't in your composition, so that you can more accurately see where your focus plane is. This is with the 70-200 f2.8, and again, just great experience as far as stabilizing the shots. Obviously, since we were out on a rainy day visiting waterfalls, and these waterfalls are epic. I mean, they're, I think, over 150 feet. I think one of the waterfalls may be over 200 feet tall. There was a lot of water everywhere, and the camera got, really wet. But I've yet to deal with any issues from any of my Nikon bodies, actually, including the Z6, as far as water resistance goes. It does a great job, and I recommend bringing your gear home and letting everything kind of air dry before you wipe everything down. Open up your battery compartments and all the little doors and latches to let the body air dry as best you can before everything gets patted down and wiped down. So going back to, focus peaking, one other thing that I like about this camera is the EVF. It's my first experience with an EVF, and therefore I can't really compare it to other brands. I can't say if it's better or worse, but it's been a good experience so far. I love that I can capture video through a viewfinder now, just for those moments that might be distracting, having a bright screen in, I don't know, let's say a concert setting or whatnot, or a wedding. One thing I want to say about slow motion or really just video in general is I do find the guideline of sticking to twice your frame rate for your shutter speed to be a good guideline, especially for the frame rates that are lower, right? So if you're doing a talking head segment, and you're only capturing 24 frames per second, definitely try your best not to shoot faster than 1/50th. And this is because, each frame it needs to allow for natural movement, and anything faster than 1/50th is going to show in your video footage. The thing is, though, about this guideline, I don't find that to be really something you need to stick to that heavily when it's high frame rates. So 120 frames per second, your shutter speed, the guideline puts you at 1/250th. Well, if you're trying to, compensate for an overexposed shot, and you don't want to give up, say, your depth of field, 1/250th is a pretty sharp frame. So you can actually get away with speeding up your shutter speed before you really notice any stutteriness in your footage. I wouldn't go more than like 1/800th or so. I think the last thing I'll mention is, make sure that you guys are dividing the native frame rate that you're capturing your footage at by the sequence setting frame rate. So this sequence, for example, is 23.976, and that is 20% of 119.88 frames per second. So when I bring my footage in and I want it to be super smooth, I slow it down to 20%, and this yields the absolute smoothest look that I can get. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions or feedback for me. Still learning a lot about the camera. It's been a great experience so far. It's so easy to use, and I'm consistently amazed at the IQ and just these little hidden features, that I keep forgetting the camera has. The IBIS, the focus peaking, the 120 is just, that's butter. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next week.